Thank you so much for your time, Thupten Jinpa. I recently saw a short video in which you were talking about compassion towards self and being kind towards yourself. And having gone to a Tibetan school called the Tibetan Children's Village, where the motto of the school is others before self, I just never heard of compassion being talked about that way. And I was wondering if you can expound on that a little bit and also talk a little bit about how do you practice that in your day-to-day life, and how do you then stop it from veering into the territory of being selfish?
Thank you. That's a very, very important question. And the reason why in my book, as well as that talk I gave, there's an important focus on the self-compassion, has partly to do with the audience that I'm trying to reach out. It's a really Western audience. And one of the things that I was quite struck through my work at Stanford and other places is the level to which, or the degree to which self-compassion is a problem for a lot of people. And I think, and I mean, in Buddhism, there is very little discussion of actual self-compassion. But if you look carefully, self-compassion is kind of assumed. So the practice starts from this assumption of someone who has a self-compassion. But in the West, that assumption is just too much to make. And the interesting thing is that with self-compassion, if you are suffering from a deficit in that area, then sometimes what happens is that you tend to escape that need which is in you, and then you use your relationship with others as a way of, because you do need to express your nurturing side. And then it sort of, and then at some point, because you're giving too much, so much, you feel exhausted. And sometimes in an important relationship where you have made a lot of investment, if things don't work out, you feel bitter. So having a self-compassion really protects you against it, because you are building an inner resource and reserve so that you have, a wonderful example of someone with a healthy self-compassion is someone like His Holiness. There's a real sense of ease with himself. He's perfectly comfortable in his body. And there is and you actually feel it when you're next to someone there is a sense of ease. There is a kind of a relaxedness about the energy around this person, because there isn't that anxiety, there isn't that heaviness, that sort of generally people tend to bring. So if you are able to cultivate self-compassion, where there is an ability to be kind to yourself, also ability to really see your own need and situation in the context of others, this is a very healthy self-to-self relationship. Self-compassion and narcissistic self-love are completely different. It may sound the same because love and compassion are similar, but actually, phenomenologically, it will feel completely different. Because when you have a narcissistic self-love, there is no place for others. There is no room for others. The focus is just on you. It's very narrow. Whereas when you are experiencing a sense of self-compassion, there is space for others. And you don't feel alienated. You don't feel disconnected. And it feels completely different. Narcissistic self-love and self-compassion would feel completely different. And same thing with self-pity. Self-pity is a form of the flip side of narcissistic self-love. Again, you wallow in your own, why me, why me, why me? It just becomes very narrow. But self-compassion and self-kindness has a completely different feel to it. So the more you are able to, because one of the things in the West I notice is that sometimes people are very conflicted about thinking about their needs. Because probably it has to do with thinking, you shouldn't be selfish, it's bad, you need to have a kind of a healthy balance. And this is one area, again, where Buddhism can make a contribution. Because in Buddhism, there isn't that sharp dichotomy between, self-interest and others' interest. So a truly compassionate action, having benefit to yourself, isn't a problem. Whereas in the Western conception of altruism and compassion, sometimes there is this feeling that if there is some benefit to yourself, somehow it's tainted. It isn't pure. You know, I mean, the compassion and altruism should be actually, if anything, painful. You know, so, and if it's not painful, it isn't morally kind of, valuable. So this is partly a cultural kind of thing, whereas and in reality too, the self-interest and others' interest are pretty interconnected. So I think self-compassion, so that's why I was trying to get at this, because if you are struggling in that area, it's very difficult to build a healthy, compassionate attitude towards others. Then we will leave our compassionate impulse just as a kind of a reactive response. When it's triggered, it comes up, but when it's not triggered, then it stays. Whereas if you have a healthy self-compassion, then you are able to build a resilience so that compassion can then become a proactive standpoint from which you can relate to others, so that it doesn't depend upon being triggered.